What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another World of Warcraft Dragonflight beta video. So this is a continuation of a series I'm doing where I'm trying to get targeted feedback on the structure for how I'm going to do guides when it comes to Dragonflight. So these are going to be guides that are for the pre-patch and early Dragonflight, focused on helping people get from level 60 to level 70. If you haven't seen my first video in this series, I'd encourage you to go and check it out. I kind of go into depth on like why we're doing this now, and a little bit more about the reasoning and how you guys are going to be helping me by giving me feedback here. So be sure to check that out. You're also still able to provide feedback on that video, so all feedback is appreciated. And this is a great opportunity for you to really help shape what these guides are going to look like when I start actually officially putting them out, probably starting with the pre-patch. We'll see. So in this video, the targeted feedback that I want is on how we go over the talent build itself. Okay, the talent trees have made things kind of complicated because previously what I would do is I'd open the spell book, I'd arrange all my spells, I'd go through the spells and just briefly describe what they do. Then we would hop over to the talent tree and there were 10 choices. And we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and we just talk about them real quick. And then we move on and talk about the rotation. Well, there are like 80 choices on these talent trees to cover. So I have a couple of concerns about that, like how long it's going to take to go through and talk about the build. And so I have a few different ways that I'm thinking of doing it. And what I want to do here is kind of demo one of those and get your feedback on it. So this is going to be the one that I think personally I'm going to prefer to do. Okay, so what I want to see from you guys is whether or not this makes sense to you. Okay, so we're going to jump in. And again, this is just going to be like a rough demo of how this is going to go. In the previous video, I asked you for feedback on the type of video and also the UI, the action bars and keybinds and stuff. So we're not talking about that here. We're talking specifically about the talent trees and the build itself. So here's my idea for how I would go through and talk about this. So first thing we would do is talk about all of our active abilities that we have on our bars. My preference would be, if we like the way the UI and stuff is set up, we talk about them that way on the actual action bars. Otherwise, we would talk about them through the spell book. And the reason we talk about them in the spell book is the spellbook has abilities like Battle Shout and Charge in it that you don't get from the talent tree. So if we were to try to go through and talk about the different talents in the talent tree and go through the actives and everything, like, we're not going to hit every ability that we're going to be using for this particular class. So that would be the way that we would do it. My preference would be to just go through the action bars. Most people that watch these should know how these are set up. I'll have a video for that if that's the direction we go. If we don't go that direction, then we just jump into the spell book. But I like the action bar way because everything's in a category, right? So we can kind of run through every defensive ability we have in one shot, right? And talk about the options. Then what we'd do is we'd come into the tree and we'd look at the pathing. Okay, and so I wouldn't need to explain every ability and things like that because we'd already have gone over them. So I could just say, all right, so we've got battle stance and defensive stance. We've got berserkers, rage, and impending victory. On this tier, we picked up War Machine, and I would talk about the passives and why we picked them up. And as we went through, if there was any talent that I didn't take, or if there was a choice node that I think you could go either way with, I could mention that as we go, just in case, right? So, for example, you know, maybe here on this node, like I chose this one, and I could just say, it's totally cool if you pick this one. Or if we just want to stick entirely to the build with no options, then we don't have to do that. We'll just go through and talk about the passives that we picked up. So that's going to be my first question, is do we talk about alternatives in these videos? Or do we just go through the build? Okay. Do we just go through the build? When we get to this node, I just talk about barbaric training and don't even mention concussive blows. So then we would go through the passives and kind of link everything together. And then we would move on to the next section of the guide. So what I want to do here for you is I want to give you a rough demo, a quick, I don't want to say lazy, but I'm not trying to make the video right now. I'm trying to give you a demo of what this would look like. So I want to give you a quick demo of doing it the way that I think I would prefer to do it. Okay. So I do all my nice intros and everything. I talk about, hey, if you haven't watched the video where I cover how I set up my action bars, you can check it out. There's a card here. There's a link in the description. You'll need that to kind of understand the flow, but once you watch it one time, you're good for all the videos, if we go that route, okay? Then we would jump in and we would start talking about the actual abilities, right? So I think the way that I would do this is probably just approach this with the core rotation last, since that's what you're going to need the most. I think I would start over here with any notable abilities that I wanted to mention, like, hey, we've got Battle Shout, and this is going to increase your attack power for 5% for an hour, so make sure you always have that on. Then we go down to utility, because these are weird abilities that you probably don't need to really have memorized necessarily all the time. So I'd go, hey, we got Berserker's Rage. This is going to give you immunity to Fear, Sap, and Incapacitate. We got Heroic Throw. This will let you throw a weapon and pull an enemy. We've got our Taunt, and then we have Challenging Shout, which is an AoE taunt. Then we come over and we would talk about our CC abilities, and I'd say, all right, so our main CC is right here. This is Pummel. It's an interrupt ability. Then we have Storm Bolt. This is a 4-second stun on a 30-second cooldown that we can use. And we also have Hamstring, which is going to slow the target. Probably won't use this too much when we're questing. Come in and talk about our movement abilities. So our main movement ability is going to be Charge. It generates rage. It's got 2 charges, etc., etc. We also have Heroic Leap, which is a 30-second cooldown, and it's going to deal some damage to enemies and blah, 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 blah. All right, so then we move in. Our main defensive ability is going to be Impending Victory. So this is going to do blah, 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 blah. Our other defensive abilities that we have available are Last Stand, which is going to increase our health by 30% and heal us for that amount. We also have Shield Wall, which will reduce damage taken by 40%. We have Shield Block, and we have Ignore Pain. Our main offensive ability we're going to be using is going to be Revenge. Revenge is going to deal AoE damage in front of us, and also our successful dodges and parries have a chance to make our next Revenge cost no rage. Our other offensive abilities we have are going to be Ravager, which does AoE damage, a lot of AoE damage, has a 1.5-minute cooldown. We also have access to Whirlwind and Slam, but we won't be using those very often, if at all. Our core rotation is going to start with our spammable ability, which is going to be Shield Slam. We're going to want to hit this like every single time that it's off cooldown and available to us. We have Rend, which is a bleed damage over time ability that we can place onto our target for additional damage. We have Thunderclap, which is an AoE that'll generate some rage for us and deal a little bit of damage. We have Execute, which costs 20 to 40 rage, and it's a big finisher ability that we can use on targets below 20% health, or 35% health. We have Demoralizing Shout, which is a 45-second cooldown shout that's going to reduce the damage that enemies take, or enemies deal to us, by 25% for 8 seconds, and it's going to generate 40 rage. We also have Thunderous Roar, which has a 1-minute cooldown, and it's going to deal AoE damage around us and also put a bleed on all targets that it hits, and it's going to generate 20 rage for us. We have 2 different stances here available to us. So we have Defensive Stance, which we're not going to use, but if you want to, it reduces damage you take, but also reduces damage you deal. What we're going to use is Battle Stance, which is going to give us 3% critical strike chance. It also gives us some movement speed and parrying effect reduction, but we're not really worried about that. We just are taking it for the 3% crit. All right, so at that point, we've covered kind of, you know, like I said, rough, not going through it super specific, just trying to give you an idea. We've covered all the active abilities. Literally every active ability we have in our spell book has now been covered. So then we would go into the talent tree. And I'd say, okay, so we're going to run through the talent tree and take a look at the passives that we picked up and how they synergize with our build. So our first passive here is going to be War Machine. This is going to make our auto attacks generate more rage. Killing an enemy will generate 10 rage and increase our movement speed by 30% for 8 seconds. So we're picking this up because the movement speed after killing an enemy is awesome for getting around open world. Also, we're going to up our rage generation, and we have some other synergies with auto attacks in the build. Next, we have Fast Footwork. It's a passive 5% movement speed increase. Next, we have Siphoning Strikes. So this is going to give us 5% leech, which is just going to help us keep our health topped off. Then we have Frothing Berserker. So Revenge, which is our main offensive ability we're going to be using here, has a 20% chance to immediately refund 50% of the rage spent, which means that we're going to be able to keep our rage reserves up and continue to use abilities that cost rage. We have Furious Blows, so this is going to increase our auto attack speed by 5%. So we're taking that because we have some auto attack synergies, including War Machine, which we just saw. So we're going to auto attack faster, and that's going to help us generate even more rage. We're picking up Crushing Force. This causes Shield Slam, which is our spammable ability here, to deal an additional 10% damage and deal 10% increased critical strike damage. So it just makes the ability that we're spamming hit even harder. We picked up Barbaric Training. So Revenge is going to deal 30% more damage, but now cost 10 more rage. Now, that is going to make Revenge a little bit more expensive, but we have some other Revenge synergies in addition to the potential for Revenge to still refund 50% of the rage spent. We picked up Bounding Stride. This is going to reduce the cooldown on Heroic Leap by 15 seconds. So that's going to bring it down to a 30-second cooldown for us. And also, after we Heroic Leap, our run speed is going to be increased by 70% for 3 seconds. So again, just more movement speed, more mobility. We picked up Blood and Thunder, which is going to increase the damage of Thunderclap by 10%. So that's just going to hit harder. And if we Thunderclap a target that's affected by our Rend, which is our bleed ability that we have here, it's going to also spread that Rend to 5 nearby targets. Also, if the targets already have Rend, it will refresh the duration of Rend on them. So it helps you to basically have nonstop Rend on all targets in AoE. Then we have Sidearm. Your auto attacks have a 15% chance to hurl weapons at your target and 3 other enemies in front of you, dealing an additional amount of physical damage. So this, combined with our increased auto attack speed, means that we have the ability to potentially proc this more often just to deal additional damage to the targets in front of us. We have Reinforced Plates, which I think I missed. Increase your armor by 20%. So this is just going to make us take less damage. We've got Honed Reflexes, the cooldown of Shield Slam, our spammable ability that we want to use all the time, and Pummel, which is our interrupt, are reduced by 1 second. So we can interrupt more often and we could Shield Slam more often. We've got Double Time, so this gives us an extra charge of charge and reduces the cooldown by 3 seconds. So this is going to keep us mobile, it's going to keep us moving from target to target, and also since charge does generate some rage for us, it's going to help us with generating rage when we're low as well. We have Seismic Reverberation. If Whirlwind or Revenge hits 3 or more enemies, it hits them 1 additional time for 30% damage. We're mainly going to be using Revenge here, and we're almost always going to be pulling 3+ targets on Protection Warrior. So this should proc a good majority of the time. Obviously, it becomes less effective as stuff actually starts dying that you pulled. But for the initial, grouping, you're going to be dealing that additional damage. Plus, we picked up revenge dealing more damage, so that 30% is going to hit harder than a normal revenge as well. We picked up quick thinking, so this increases our haste. Again, our haste is going to help us with our cooldowns a little bit, but it's also going to help us auto attack faster, which ties into everything else we've talked about so far as that goes. And our auto attack critical strikes will increase your auto attack speed by 20% for 10 seconds. So now, as we're attacking faster, we have more opportunities to get crits. As we get those crits, it's going to increase our attack speed even more. We also picked up one-handed weapon specialization to increase damage done with one-handed weapons and increase our leech by another 5%. So as we're hitting those targets with those auto attacks with the one-handed weapon we're using, we're dealing more damage, and we also gain additional leech from that as well. Then these talents are tied to Thunderous Roar, which is our big AoE damage and bleed ability we talked about. And we've grabbed the one here that reduces the cooldown by 30 seconds. This is what puts it at a 1 minute cooldown for us instead of a minute and a half. Then we also have Thunderous Words. This increases the duration of Thunderous Roar's bleed effect by 2 seconds and increases the damage of your bleed effects by 20% at all times. So we're really taking this for the 20% increased bleed effects at all times. But, you know, the additional amount of duration on Thunderous Roar is going to help us if we pull a really big group of enemies and we're just not getting to all of them in time, or if we pull something like an elite or a rare spawn that has more health, then we can get the full benefit of that. So basically we do something like that, right? And then we go over to the protection side and we do essentially the same thing. A couple of things I just realized is, one, we need to make sure that we cover the default passives that we get. So for example, for Protection Warrior, we're going to need to cover Deep Wounds. We need to cover our Mastery. We'll need to cover Riposte, Vanguard. So we'll want to talk about those first, because Deep Wounds, for example, causes the enemy to bleed, and that ties into increasing the damage of the bleeds here, and then some other talents over here. So I have to make sure that I cover those first. And then I also do actually have PvP talents that I'm picking out. The intention with picking the PvP talents is what I've always done with PvP talents. If you're going to have War Mode on and you want to pick the PvP talents, they're going to help you the most against enemies, not players, then this is what I would pick. Okay, obviously, if you're gonna choose your War Mode talents based on PvP, then that's going to be entirely different, and it's going to depend on, are you solo, are you playing with a friend, are you playing with a group, what sort of utility do you need? So for me, I find that generally the best thing to offer people is, hey, if you're going to PvP and you want to just take the talents that are going to help you quest easier, these are the ones I would take. And in the case of Warrior, I picked out 2, and then the last slot I really think is super flexible, so I would talk about the options there. So I do intend to offer those PvP talents as well. So that's a look at how I think I would like to go through the talent trees. I definitely want feedback from you guys. Please keep in mind that I did not put my full personality and everything into going through this, because I just wanted to show briefly what this would look like. Okay, so please don't watch this and be like, oh man, Set's gonna be so boring and just brr, brr, brr. No, it's not. No. I'm trying to push these out and get feedback before I actually invest all the time and energy and stuff into making them the high quality things that you guys would come to expect from me. So let me know what you think about that. So like I said, in my version, the version I demoed here, we would go through the abilities on the action bar as they're set up, talking about them in categories, right? From our miscellaneous abilities to our utility, into our crowd control, into our movement, into defense, into offense, into our core rotation. Then from there, we would jump in and we would talk about our default passive abilities for our class, including our mastery and etc. Then we would jump into the talent tree and we would cover the passives and why we took them. Then we would move on to the next portion of the guide, which would be actually like showcasing what you do with it. Okay. All right, so if you guys can provide me feedback on this, I would greatly appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you kind of enjoyed the behind the scenes on like what this all looks like when I'm doing it and putting it together. A lot of times I just make these decisions myself, but we've got time before the pre-patch, and with you guys being awesome enough to fund season 1 here on the channel, and with my just shift in focus on making sure that, you know, I'm all about community and helping you guys out, I thought this would be a great opportunity to just get that feedback from you guys and have you help influence the way these guys are going to be put together. So, all right, let me know what you think. Hit the comments. More detail, the better. But if you just like the way I did it, then I like it is good too. All right. So thanks everybody. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you on the next one.